Right, welcome back, everybody. It's been a month since we were learning Gemarah together due to various things, largely my trip away. Welcome back to Julia and to Jeffrey, who's disappeared again. We wish them both long life for their losses. Quite strange, really. Julia's loss was a very young man in the prime of his life. Jeffrey's loss was a lady who lived till 1 month short of her 106th birthday. We have no understanding of these matters. They are in the Almighty's hands. We just have to deal with them, and we wish everybody concerned only smachot in the future. Okay, let's learn some a Gemara or Mishnah actually in the zechut of Shalom ben Aharon. Shalom ben.
Well, his mother's name it's Shalom ben Sarah, but if you want his father's name, it's Shalom ben Chai Chwati. Say that if you can.
I think we'll stick with Sarah. Shalom ben Sarah and Leah bat Malka. Let's learn it in their zechut. Okay, so we are at the beginning of chapter 2 of Sanhedrin. I will share the screen with you straight away. There it is. We are on page 101 in Michael Kraus and Johnny Halpern's book. Those of you who've got the Steinsaltz, it's on page 101. We were talking about the Kohen Gadol and what we can do and what we can't do in terms of judging him. Can he be a judge? Can he be judged? And last time, if you recall, I showed you some really interesting videos of chalitza. Because we were talking about whether the Kohen Gadol can do chalitza. And that was really interesting that we saw 3 different versions of chalitza. We saw a Hasidic version, we saw a New York Litvish version, and we saw a Tehran Sephardi version. And what was interesting, of course, is that they were basically the same, only the pronunciations and the trappings were slightly different. So that was all about chalitza. And then, of course, we spoke also about yibum. Yibum being levirate marriage. And, of course, he cannot do levirate marriage, the Kohen Gadol, because he's not allowed to marry a widow. And we looked at that. We also looked at the reason why a Kohen Gadol is not allowed, or a Kohen is not allowed to marry a convert. And we spoke about converts being considered to be loose women. And then we went into a whole digression about conversion. That's how we ended it last time. So we are over here. Met lo met. What does that mean? Met lo met. We're still talking about the Kohen Gadol here. We're talking about the Kohen Gadol. If a Kohen Gadol suffers a close relative's death, what is the halacha?
I thought they could go for seven relatives.
Okay, which 7 relatives can they go for, Johnny?
I think it's mother, father, son, daughter, brother, sister, and wife, yes.
Okay, almost correct. Incorrect on 2 counts. Okay, who knows which 2 counts Johnny was incorrect on? Well, the first one is a sister, can only do it for an unmarried sister. Okay. And the second incorrect one is that they're all incorrect, because a Kohen Gadol cannot become tamei, cannot become impure for anyone. What those 7 people that you mentioned are for a regular Kohen. Okay, a regular Kohen can be metameh, can be made ritually impure for those 7 relatives. And where do we learn that? Anybody know, before I ask David Marks, where we learn that from?
Well, does the unmarried sister come into it then for a Kohen?
Kohen is an unmarried sister is one of the 7. A married sister, he cannot.
He cannot. A regular Kohen can't go. Oh, okay.
No.
Okay. Even if she's a widow.
Even if she's a widow, yeah, she's no.
Okay.
Need to check that up. Don't quote me on that until I check it.
Okay.
But once she's married, she's no longer considered to be a bat Kohen. So where do we learn that from?
I'm not sure.
There it is. Well, let's have a look. David Marks, where do we learn that from?
The beginning of Parashat Emor.
Correct. There we go. Correct as always. Chapter 21 of Vayikra. It's on the screen for you there. Jeffrey, are you with us? Right. Good to have you back to do our reading again. Verse 1, please.
And the Lord said to Moses, speak to the Kohanim, the sons of Aaron, and say to them, let none of you, in brackets, defile himself for a dead person among his people, except for his relative who is close to him, his mother, his father, his son, his daughter, his brother, and for his virgin sister who is close to him, who was not yet with a man for her, he shall defile himself.
Okay, so there you are. That's a regular Kohen. Those are the 7 people he can be defiled for. Yes, Julia.
I was going to say that Shalom, who was a Kohen, and his children, who were his children, who 16-year-old and 14-year-old sons, Shalom is buried at a corner plot, so they don't need to go walk near anybody else's grave. They stay on the road the whole time.
Yes, and in fact, I was a bit involved in that because there was a whole kerfuffle in order to achieve that, and it was only achieved at the very last minute by the various pressures of various different people. Kol hakavod to everybody that got involved in that. And absolutely, Shalom is buried on the corner there, and that means that his sons can, in fact, go and visit the grave without defiling themselves close to other to go to be in close contact with other graves. Correct. So that which Jeffrey has just read out was the regular Kohanim. However, we're not talking in our Mishnah about a regular Kohen. We are talking about the Kohen Gadol. How is the Kohen Gadol described in this chapter? Anybody know how he is described? It's just at the bottom of the page, which I haven't showed you yet. I'm going to scroll up and show you. Okay, so he is described as here, Pasuk Yud. He's described as HaKohen HaGadol Me'echav, the Kohen who is greater than his brothers. And it always used to make me smile because Ravi Doe always used to refer to Chaim Cohen, our very, very lovely guy who davens in our shul, Chaim Cohen. He always used to describe him as a Kohen HaGadol Me'echav because he's a tall guy and he was taller than all the others. So he was described as a Kohen HaGadol Me'echav. So the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, let's read this. Jeffrey's busy, so I'll read it. And the Kohen who is elevated above his brothers, upon whose head the anointment oil has been poured, or who has been inaugurated to wear the garments, he shall not leave his hair unshorn or rend his garments, and he shall not come upon any dead bodies, and he shall not defile himself or his father or his mother. So the Kohen Gadol, Johnny, did not defile himself for any of them. So that was the a bit of a trick question, really, to be honest. It was a bit unfair that I threw that in you, a bit of a curveball, but you got the other 7 almost completely correct. So let's go back to the Gemarah then. Let's go back to the Gemarah. Do you have the Gemarah on the screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. Right.
Yes.
So the Mishnah says, "Met lo met." A Kohen Gadol suffers the death of a close relative. We know from the psukim that we have just said that he is not allowed to become ritually impure, even for those 7 close relatives. So let's just digress for a second and discuss this state that the Kohen is in at this point. He has suffered a loss, but the burial has not yet taken place. We're all familiar with the concept of being an avel, being a mourner. We have an avel who is in the mourning period of Shiva. Then we have the next mourning period of Shloshim. And then we have the next mourning period for a mother or father for Shana, 12 months. There's another one of 11 months where you say Kaddish for 11 months, not for 12 months, but the Avelut is for 12 months. Now, there is something before we get to Shiva. What's that called?
None.
Aninut is called. That's right. The person is called an onen, and it's called Aninut. David, you wanted to say something then? No. Okay. So here, the Kohen Gadol is in a state of Aninut. He is called an onen, somebody who suffers a loss, but their relative has not yet been buried. Is called an onen, and it's a very strange status to be in. It's that limbo land between having a relative who is alive and a relative who has been buried. And it's a very, very tough period of time for a person because they are, it's very raw, the loss is very recent, and the burial has not yet taken place. And this concept of aninut, of being an onen, has some very strange halachot. Anybody know what the halachot of aninut, somebody who is an onen?
You don't live.
Well, one at a time. Hannah first.
You don't say blessings on food or anything else.
Okay, Hannah says you don't say blessings. Yes, Michael.
Can't do any mitzvot.
You can't do any mitzvot. Yeah, it's a very strange thing. Yes, indeed. You do not make a bracha. It's the only time that you eat like a goy. You know, you don't eat, you don't make a bracha, you don't bench, you don't daven, you don't put on tefillin. All of the mitzvot that you would normally do as an onen, you do not do any of those things. Why is that? Why does an onen not do any of those things? Seems a bit odd, really, that you're in this position and you eat without a bracha, you don't bench, you don't say Shemona Esrei, you don't say Shema, you don't put on tefillin. What's going on? What's the reason?
Not all there.
Say that again.
I said the person who's the onan is not all there.
Okay.
He's just had a piece of his soul taken from him, and he's not in a fit state to contemplate the source of all goodness.
Okay.
They're in a state of shock.
All right. You could say that is one explanation that is given. The main explanation, however, is something slightly different. I've put the Halachipedia on the screen for you, which is a very wonderful resource for anybody that wants to have a quick look at what halakha is. The main reason why an onain is exempt from doing all those things is because what he's meant to be is busy making arrangements for the funeral. Okay, because when a person suffers a loss of a close relative, you're the person that has to do all the arrangements. That's not true today.
Is that not doing a mitzvah though? Mitzvah.
Okay, so you are doing a mitzvah, and you are doing a mitzvah,
Big mitzvah.
which is the mitzvah of arranging the burial. Okay, now today, those arrangements are largely taken out of our hands. Not entirely, as we found out with Shalom, because we still had to do all sorts of things to make sure that it went smoothly. But generally speaking, and even in Shalom's case, a lot of the work is done by either professionals, Chevra Kadisha, who are paid to do so, or volunteer Chevra Kadishas. Okay? In Israel, the Chevra Kadishas of each city, it's a job, they're paid. And of course, that's because there are zillions, no, not zillions, Baruch Hashem, there are hundreds of funerals every day, too many. So it's not like, in Manchester where you might have, 1 or 2 a week or what have you. And each little community will have its own Chevra Kadisha, where they'll do 1 a month or whatever it is. Those volunteer Chevra Kadishas are wonderful. In Israel, it's a paid job. The guys in the Netanya Chevra Kadisha, just for the record, are fabulous. They are really helpful. There's actually one of the guys, his name escapes me. He's actually from Manchester, used to be a patient of mine, and he's in the Chevra Kadisha, and he's incredibly helpful. They're all very helpful. Unfortunately, because of the business that I get involved in the shul and what have you in the community, I've been involved with the Chevra Kadisha in Netanya far too often, and they are incredibly helpful. And so they do a lot of the stuff. So you could argue, and this is the view of some poskim, that today the concept of Aninut doesn't fully exist. Come back to you in a sec, Hannah. And for example, if you look at number 2 on the screen, the common practice is that even someone whose relative that has passed away in a different city, or another relative is taking care of the burial needs, is still considered an onain. However, not all agree with this view. There are some views that say that if a person is going to be buried in another place, so let's say somebody lives in Israel and their relative lives abroad and is going to be buried abroad, and the person is not going to have anything to do with that burial, and is not even going to be at the burial because he can't get there for whatever reason, then it's some people are of the view that the state of Aninut does not apply, and therefore you do have to do all the mitzvot that you would normally do. Okay, and if you have a look at number 3, nowadays most communities have specific people who deal with the mace and the burial, such as the Chevra Kadisha, and so the immediate relatives of the deceased do not take care of the burial directly. Although some have stated that this custom frees the relatives from their status of onain, others believe that a relative is only free from being an onain if he does not accompany the mace to the burial. So like I said before, if you're in a different city, different country, whatever, that is interesting. Now, I want to point out to you number 4, because this, and number 5, because these are relevant. Number 4 is relevant to our Gemarah, and number 5 is sadly very relevant to our current situation. Number 4, Jeffrey, on the screen, please. Number 4, since you're back with us.
One who only accompanies the mace only until a certain point, but not all the way to the burial, is no longer an onen once they leave the mace.
So, for example, let's say somebody passes away in Netanya, and they have a wish to be buried in Yerushalayim, and the close relative is not able to travel out of Netanya for whatever reason, and they only accompany the mace to the car that's going to take them to Yerushalayim. They stop being an onen when that car leaves, because they're no longer in any way involved with the burial. So that would show you that Hannah's suggestion that the state of Aninut is because they're not all there is not entirely consistent. The reason of Aninut is because you're meant to be busy with doing other stuff. As Johnny said, ha'osek b'mitzvah, pator min ha'mitzvah. There is a concept, somebody who is busy with a mitzvah is pator from doing another mitzvah. Okay, so I'll give you an example of that, a fascinating example of that happened to me many, many years ago. I was invited to go to Russia to do Brit Milah on adults. It was the days were short. You can only do a Brit Milah after sunrise and before sunset, al pi halacha. We wanted to get through as many as we possibly could while we were there. And normally, if you are in a situation, for example, where you forget to daven mincha, what do you have to do?
Twice.
You have to say Shemona Esrei twice at Ma'ariv. You have to make up for it. You have to do tashlumim. Now, when we came to do all these britot, we didn't daven mincha because we didn't have time to stop. We were non-stop doing this mitzvah of Brit Milah from start to finish, from the second that sunrise to the second of sunset. There was no time to do mincha. When it came to Ma'ariv, we did not do 2 Shemona Esreis because we hadn't forgotten to do mincha. We were completely patur from mincha. We were exempt from mincha that day because we were osek b'mitzvah the whole time. Okay, so the reason that you are patur as an onen is that you are meant to be completely busy with all this business from start to finish until that happens.
Excuse me, Johnny. In Russia, when you in those circumstances, did you all discuss it first to decide whether you needed to do it twice?
Yeah.
Or
yeah. It was there were many many wise people there who knew the halacha far better than me, and it was we did, and it was a decision that was made and understood and fascinating, because that was like the first time these people had never done a mincha ever. Can't say I can have never forgotten, because I have, but it was odd that they didn't do mincha and they didn't make the tashlumim. So it's the same concept here. Yes, Hannah, you wanted to say something.
I wanted to ask a question. You're supposed to be busy doing other things, so you're an onen. What happens if the person dies, let's say, on a chag, at the beginning of a chag, at night, let's say, on Sukkot, first night Sukkot? You got the whole day is the chag. Are you onen? You can't do anything. You can't arrange a funeral on a chag.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
answer to your question is on the screen right now. Jeffrey, read it out for us, please.
The generally accepted Pesach is that there is no Aninut on Shabbat or Yom Tov, and so an onen still performs all the usual mitzvahs and brachas, including going to shul on Shabbos and Yom Tov. Okay,
there's your answer. Okay. So let's go back to...
Interesting, Johnny, I'll just mention that my dad, Oliver Shalom, died on Chol HaMoed, And straight after the funeral, Reb Ripper said, I've got to go straight back to work because I'm not an Avel till on Yom Tov. I think that's right.
Yeah, Avelut doesn't begin until after Yom Tov. That's right.
Yeah. So I went to work.
We had that. We should just mention. Was that Chol Hamoed Pesach or Sukkot?
Sukkot.
Okay. We should also mention, since we are actually the Leon Bennett Gemarah group, that Leon Zichrono Libracha also died on Chol Hamoed Sukkot, and his Shiva, the Shiva for him, did not begin until after.
Just going back to what you said before, Johnny, there was an article in the paper whilst you were away, and I forgot to cut it out, that there's a queue of people waiting to have Britot here, adults, being held up by the rabbinate because they're arguing with Asuta Hospital over charges and things. There was 200 or 300 people, I think it was, waiting for a Brit.
That's shocking. That's shocking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well,
I thought you might have known about it.
I'll keep my hand down. I haven't got time for that as well, but it is shocking. Right, let's. How did we get on all of this? Because you're going to see. That was number 4. Okay, I want you, Jeffrey, now please to read number 5 up here on the screen, because this is very relevant to our situation today.
The relatives of someone who died in captivity do not practice Aninut at all, and not avail us until the burial, until the relatives give up hope of having a burial. However, many believe that this was only the case if the captors wouldn't release the body until ransom negotiations were made. But today, if the mace is being held for medical or legal reasons, Aninut does not apply right away.
Does apply.
I'm sorry, it does apply right. I apologize. Aninut does apply right away because one can be sure that the mace will be returned to the family eventually.
So, of course, that is tragically relevant to us. Somebody who dies in captivity and the captors will not release the body until a ransom negotiations are made. There is no Aninut for these poor people who we know that Hamas are holding the bodies of some of our dead people. Their families cannot start Aninut. They cannot start Avelut. They can't do anything. Avelut does not start for any of those people until the burial. And that is a shocking situation. Who would have thought when these halachot were codified 2,000 years ago, and who would have thought whenever this was written and nicely summarized for us in Halachipedia, who would have thought that in 2024 we would be sitting in a situation where this is so tragically relevant, and we should just stop and bear a thought, not only for those people who are captured and who've been killed, of course, but also the relatives of these people who are suffering such terrible, terrible traumas, and our thoughts are with them as well at this time. Yes, David?
Johnny, have you read, like I have, that there have been Rabbonim in the current war who have offered to Pesach to families of soldiers who are presumed dead, allowing them to sit shiva?
Yes, but it's very limited as far as I understand.
On what basis?
On very, very very clear circumstantial evidence, with eyewitness evidence, in the same way as they had to deal with at the end of the Second World War, where people were had the Aguna situation and of course occasionally it went wrong, didn't it? And that people that they declared dead weren't dead, but that was only very rare situations. So as far as I understand it, David, I have read that, but it's a very, very limited situation, and only where the Rabbanim are very highly satisfied, if you like, that there is very, very strong circumstantial and preferably eyewitness evidence that they are no longer alive. But it is part of the collateral damage of this whole tragic circumstances that we will be dealing with in due course. Not only the psychological fallout from all of this, but of course the halachic fallout as well.
What's really interesting is that the same circumstances applied all those years ago. That it's not like they were seeing into the future, but that they obviously the circumstances had arisen that were very similar. That nothing has actually changed in all this time.
Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. There is nothing new under the sun. People have been kidnapped for ransom, either for monetary ransom or political ransom, forever. The Mishnah talks about it. In fact, we will get there in the Tanakh Shiur. If you are with us in the Tanakh Shiur, which you are, I think, Julia, you will sometimes. You will get there eventually when we get into Shmuel Bet. We're not far off it, actually. Well, I mean, the way speed we go, we are. But in terms of numbers of chapters, we're not that far off it. There is the story of David HaMelech and Shimi ben Bichri, who was a captive. And there was ransom discussions. He was somebody who rebelled against David. David wanted him. He was in the city. David said, hand him over or else I'm going to kill the lot of you. And so those concepts of ransoming prisoners and ransoming corpses, sadly, you're right, Julia, it goes back as far as history goes back.
I think you told us about a famous rabbi who insisted that you do not pay a ransom for me when I'm captured. I forgot who it was now. You were talking about it not so long ago.
And we have seen many instances in the current situation where hero soldiers who have been killed have left instructions, letters to their family and to the country to say that if I am captured, do not ransom me. I do not give you permission to ransom me or my body. And these are kids.
Yeah,
who are doing
recently
it is just utterly mind-boggling and humbling. And I can't think of any of the correct adjectives to describe how we should feel and how we do feel when we read of these things, of these incredible boys and girls who are fighting on our behalf and who are so sure that they are doing God's work, that they have the maturity and the kedusha, the holiness to write these things that they write. It is utterly humbling. I find it very difficult even to put it into words how we should feel and how we do feel about this. Okay, let's go back to the Gemarah.
Just before we move on, I understand the practicality of the halakha, but if one looks at an emotional or a person or a psychological point of view to what I said before about a person's not there completely, when he stops following the mace, like if the person's being buried in another city and he only follows it to the edge of the Netanya, I would wonder whether that gives the beginning of closure to the pain and the whatever, and that's another reason why he may not be considered a nun anymore, because the closure is starting. Possibly. With the fact that he sent the body off.
Yeah,
possibly. I'm beginning to heal.
Possibly. And of course, you would be right in saying that the whole of the process of mourning is about closure. That's why Shiva ends, and you get up from Shiva and you re-enter society. That's why after Shloshim, then you start to, shave your beard and you start to look a bit more menschlich. And after 12 months, that's a final closure. So you're right that, I'm sure you're right, that the concept of Aninut is part of this process. Aninut, you're completely out of it, as you say, your head's not there, and also you're busy with all the stuff. Then you've got Shiva, where you come into your shell, you're not allowed out of your house, you don't change your clothes, you don't do any of those things. It's a completely insular existence. Then you get up from Shiva and you go outside into society again, but you're still at arm's length. Jeffrey asked me a question yesterday, what should he do about invitations? And I said, during Shloshim, you don't accept invitations because you're still at arm's length. You're still in that little bit of a bubble, not as much as in Shiva, but you're still in it. And then after that, you're at lesser arm's lengths. And so you're right, Hannah, the whole process of Avelut could not have been designed better if it had been designed by, 21st century psychologists. They could not have done a better job. The psychology of Avelut is phenomenal, and it has not been bettered in thousands of years. Don't know why we should be surprised about that. We shouldn't, but we are, because we think we're cleverer than previous generations. We're not. You're right. It must be part of that healing process. I agree. Okay, let's go back to the Gemara, and you'll see why I spent some time on that. Because I spent some time on it because it's important, and also because we never in our shiur do we like to miss an opportunity to learn something, and especially if it's got sources to it. But this actually has great relevance to the Gemara that we are learning, and I'm going to get the Gemara back on the screen right now. Okay, now, met lo met. The high priest has a relative who dies, and he is then in a state of Aninut. Okay, the burial has not yet taken place. Eino yotze achar hamita. He does not go out. We'll see where he doesn't go out of in a minute. He does not go out after the mitah. What is a mitah?
Death.
Say again, Hannah.
A death, a bed.
Yeah, mitah is a bed. Mitah is a bed. Modern Hebrew, mitah is a bed. Okay, here it means the deathbed. It means he translates it here, shines out as the bier, not the beer, B-E-R, the B-I-E-R. Okay, the coffin, or the trolley, or whatever it is that we do. Of course, in Israel we don't use wooden coffins. In Chutz La'aretz we do. It's something that people from Chutz La'aretz, the first time they see that, find it rather difficult, where you can still see the outline of the person wrapped up in the tachrichim, but that's how they do it. But this
the soldiers are buried in coffins for one reason or another.
The soldiers are buried in coffins because they're buried in their uniforms.
Really?
That's a halacha as well. Soldiers, really? Yeah, it's a brilliant halacha. I can't remember the source of it now off the top of my head. I have to look it up. But there is a source for this in Tanakh, that a soldier who dies in battle is buried in his uniform, not in tachrichim, because that is his shroud, that is his, if you like, his entrance to Olam Haba. Yeah, Julia's struggling with this, and we all are, and it's very, very raw and very, very difficult for us. So these are very, very tough times, yeah, it's very hard for us all. So the Kohen Gadol, let's go back to the Gemara and try and concentrate on our Gemara and give the zechut to those who we're learning for. The Kohen Gadol does not follow the coffin, doesn't follow the corpse. It doesn't go out and follow the corpse. Why not?
Because he's not meant to be in the vicinity of that.
Why not?
To be
get tummy.
To be defiled.
How do you get defiled?
By touching.
By touching, that's right. So what we're worried about, if he follows the coffin, remember we're talking about a close relative here, mother, father, daughter, son, etc. We're worried that the Kohen Gadol is going to become emotionally overcome and touch the corpse and want to say a last goodbye, or whatever it is, to put his hand on the corpse. There is a concern that the Kohen Gadol will do that. And so in order to prevent that occurrence, the Mishnah says that the high priest does not follow the corpse. And then the Mishnah refines its opinion slightly. And it says, Ella, rather, hein nixin v'hu nigle. When the coffin, we'll call it the coffin, when the coffin is covered, he is revealed. Hein niglin, when they, the people carrying the coffin, are revealed, hu nichseh, he is covered. What am I talking about there? Okay, the language is difficult. Michael Krauss is shaking his head, and unless you've read the translation, you won't have a clue what's going on here. What it means is that he should not be in direct sight of the coffin. So when the coffin is on the street, he should be round the corner so that he can't see the coffin. When the coffin goes round the corner, then he can come out and go to the next corner. But he needs to be out of sight. So when the coffin is revealed, he needs to be hidden from it. When the coffin is hidden, in other words, it's gone round the corner, then he can come out. And so if he's not got the coffin in his direct visual sight, then there is no possibility of him running up to the coffin and touching the mace and becoming ritually impure. So the first opinion, which we will see, is Rabbi Meir. The first opinion is that the high priest does not follow the coffin when it is in direct view. He's not allowed to have the coffin in direct view. And also, b'yotze imahem, he can go with them in this manner of round the corner and not being completely visible. Ad hetach sha'ar ha'ir. He can go out until the entrance of the city gate. In other words, he can leave his home or the Beit HaMikdash, and he can follow the funeral procession from a distance in a manner where he can't see the actual coffin as far as the city gates. Why can he not go beyond the city gates, according to Rabbi Meir?
Because you could then see the coffin, because there's no buildings in the way.
Yeah, correct. There's a practical reason. Well done, Michael. Outside the city gates, it's open air. It's there's no buildings to shield him from the sight of the coffin. So as they go through the city gates, that's where he says his goodbyes. Divrei Rabbi Meir. That is the opinion of Rabbi Meir. We have a dissenting view.
It's sad, isn't it? It's sad that even for a Kohen Gadol, when he loses a mother or father, he can't get near them.
It is a burden of responsibility on leadership.
Yeah.
Being a leader of all sorts is a burden. Kohen Gadol is a leader, and he has to sacrifice himself for that. You're right. It is tough. I'm sure it's very, very tough. and the Kohen Gadol has that responsibility, and he has that toughness. All leaders have responsibilities which are burdensome. The greater the responsibility, the greater the burden. And this is one of the burdens of the Kohen Gadol. Let's have a look at what Rabbi Yehuda says. Rabbi Yehuda says something different. He says even stricter. And he says, Eino yotze min hamikdash. He does not go out. He's not allowed to leave the temple, the Bet HaMikdash, which means that he can't even go to the city gates, according to Rabbi Yehuda. He's not allowed out of the temple. And the Rabbi Yehuda brings us a scriptural proof from Leviticus 21, as it says there, Vayikra. Let's get it up on the screen. And it was the very next pasuk that we read. There we go. Verse 12, Jeffrey. Well, do verse 10, 11, and 12 for us.
And the Kohen who is elevated above his brothers, upon whose head the anointment oil has been poured, who has been inaugurated to wear the garments, he shall not leave his hair unshorn or rend his garments. And he shall not come upon any dead bodies. He shall not defile himself for his father or his mother. He shall not leave the sanctuary, and he will not desecrate the holy things of his God. For the crown of his God's anointing oil is upon him. I am the Lord. Okay,
so you can see the translation there. Has anybody got handy a Steinsaltz Chumash or an Art Scroll Chumash?
I've got a Chumash, but depends which book you want.
Vayikra. Okay, what I'm
not
interested
the Art Scroll.
Okay, go to Leviticus chapter 21, Jeffrey. What I'm interested to see is one letter. In our translation on the screen, we have the capital letter S. He shall not leave the sanctuary. What does that mean with a capital S?
Bet HaMikdash, the holy.
The Bet HaMikdash. So our translation on the screen goes according to Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah says he doesn't leave the sanctuary, and he quotes this pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda quotes this pasuk. How much clearer would you like it to be? Umin hamikdash lo yetze. From the sanctuary he does not go out. So Rabbi Yehuda is on strong ground here because he's got a very, very clear scriptural proof. Jeffrey, have you found it?
But it doesn't say.
I've not found it yet. I'm looking.
It just says Mikdash.
David, what have you got there?
Yeah, it is a capital S.
In Art Scroll?
Yes.
21:12.
Yeah.
He shall not leave the sanctuary, and he shall not desecrate the sanctuary.
Capital S for sanctuary, Hannah?
Capital S.
Okay, that's good. Right, now let's have a look at Steinsaltz. I've got the Steinsaltz. Let's see. So far, everybody is supportive of Rabbi Yehuda. Maybe Rav Steinsaltz will support Rabbi Meir. Who knows? Let's just find it. Hang on. There we go. Parashat Emor. Yeah, capital S. All right. So everybody seems to say this is the Bet HaMikdash, except for our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir. Let's go to our Mishnah, Rabbi Meir. There we are. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Mishum Shenema Min HaMikdash Lo Yetze. He quotes our pasuk and says, of course he can't go out to the city gates. What are you talking about, Rabbi Meir? There's a pasuk in the Torah that tells us this. So what does Rabbi Meir say? Okay, so over there. So, Rabbi, we have to ask a question and say, "Oh, surely my screen is frozen now." There it goes. Surely, Rabbi Meir knows that pasuk as well, right? He's read the Torah, Rabbi Meir. What's he going to do with that? Anybody wants to suggest what it means?
Well, he doesn't. Should it say Bet HaMikdash? It just says Mikdash.
Okay, the Bet HaMikdash is often referred to as just HaMikdash.
But it could also, HaMikdash, be something else that doesn't begin with a capital S, sanctuary, which is not a definitive sanctuary, but general.
Exactly. I'm going to read you the footnote in the Art Scroll Gemarah, which it seems to me was written by Julia in a previous existence, because it says exactly what Julia has just said. It says Rabbi Yehuda takes this verse literally to mean that a Kohen Gadol who is an onein may not leave the Beit HaMikdash. Rabbi Meir, who permits a Kohen Gadol to leave the Beit HaMikdash and to go to the city gates, contends that the word Mikdash is interpreted here to mean sanctity with a small s. In his view, the verse means from his state of sanctity he shall not depart. Lo umina mikdash, and from his status of being holy, i.e. not being impure, lo yetze, he shall not go out, i.e. he should avoid a situation that could lead to a loss of his sanctity. And that is consistent with Rabbi Meir's view that he can go to the city gates, but he can't see the aron, the coffin, or the mitah, because he might touch it in his grief and become tamei. So Rabbi Meir takes that verse and says, of course I know that verse, Rabbi Yehuda. What, you think I'm daft? Of course I know that verse, but I understand that verse to mean that the Kohen Gadol has to be careful not to leave, lo yetze, to go out of, not to leave his exalted state of holiness, from the word kodesh, mikdash, same word. And therefore I am giving him the tools to be able to accompany his mate, his dead relative, to a certain degree, but I'm putting in place safeguards so that he will not leave his state of sanctity. That being, don't look at the mitah directly, make sure it's out of view, excuse me, and once it gets to the city gates, that's your lot. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, I'm taking this pasuk literally, the Kohen Gadol cannot leave the Beit HaMikdash. What is the halakha? Who do we paskin like? Have a guess. Have a guess.
Rabbi Meir.
Huh?
Rabbi Meir.
Why'd you say that, Hannah?
Because I'm sitting here with the Ramban.
Okay, what's the real answer?
Well, the Ramban says that he sides with Rabbi Meir, and he says that there's no contradiction between the two, that not being allowed out to leave the sanctuary is an attachment to a rabbinic law. He says that.
Who says that? Ramban or Rambam?
Ramban.
Okay, and of course we paskin like the Rambam, who says, have a look at the screen for me, please. Jeffrey, if you would read this off the screen for me where I've highlighted.
If a relative of the high priest dies, mace lo mace, a high priest who is in mourning for an immediate relative may not go out to accompany the corpse in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, Rambam, Sefer Avoda, Hiklot Kalei Hamikdash.
Yes.
That's
So
what
the
it was.
Rambam paskins like Rabbi Yehuda. The Ramban, as Hannah has quoted, paskins like Rabbi Meir. So the halacha is like the Rambam. We don't have a Kohen Gadol. If we did, then he wouldn't be allowed to accompany his immediate relative. So,
Hello?
hello.
Can I just no? Just a thing that I think it's interesting that he says that the sage, because he may not become contaminated for his relatives, and the person becomes agitated over his deceased relative. Therefore, the sages feared that perhaps the Kohen Gadol would touch them, as similar to Yosef, who fell on his father's face.
Okay, good point. Yes, good point. Excellent point. We find when Yaakov dies, Yosef does touch the body, and in fact, that is the source for a son to close the eyes of his father or his mother when they have passed away. That is the source. It is a mitzvah, if possible, for a son to close the eyes of a parent for the last time, as it were. And that comes from the story of Yaakov and Yosef. Thank you for pointing that out. That's an excellent point. Right, let's stop there. We did not get to the next bit, which I sent you all on the group. I sent you a diagram. We'll get to that next week. I suspected we wouldn't get
Printed it out there, Johnny.
Oh, Johnny's printed it out already. Okay, well, we'll need that next week, please, God. What have we done today? We have talked about the halachot of Aninut, of being an onain. We've talked about where it comes from. We've talked about why. We've talked about the halachot of Aninut. We've talked about the Kohen Gadol, who is an onain. We've talked Rabbi Meir's opinion. We've spoken about the pasuk in Parashat Emor, and we have given Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, and we have a difference of opinion between the Rambam and the Ramban. And next week, please God, we will speak about how one consoles a Kohen Gadol and how a Kohen Gadol consoles other mourners. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will reconvene next week. Any questions before we go?
Thank you.
Why would they discuss this about the Kohen Gadol when there wasn't one?
Because they were very hopeful.
Did they think there were going to be one?
Yeah, they were very hopeful there would be one.
There will be. We're waiting for the next Beit Mikdash.
And that, Johnny, is exactly why Rabbi Yehuda Nasi wrote down the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Because if he didn't write it down, when we do get a Kohen Gadol, we won't know what to do. Right. So there it is in the Mishnah, ready for us to implement when the next Kohen Gadol is elected. I don't think you elect a Kohen Gadol. I don't know whether you do elect a Kohen Gadol. I suppose you must do. Anyway, we'll come back to that. Right. Any other questions or comments?
Johnny, you asked me a question at the very beginning about what we'd like to do on the 19th, and I'd like to be able to include Marcel.
Let's talk about it after you've spoken to Marcel.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.